Hello, hello. Welcome to Kinks and Beats Daily. I'm your host, Tony Fry. This is episode 204, and it's a special episode today because we are talking about the song Holiday, which was suggested by friend of the podcast, Roland, who I know he's on the Facebook group, and he's been a longtime supporter of this podcast, and he reached out to me and he said, hey, we're giving you some money every month, $4 a month to produce these things. And it'd be cool if the supporters could bump one of their favorite songs up to the top of the list. You know, because I've told you before, I do this all randomly. And that means that sometimes we get a week of randomly picked songs that maybe aren't top tier Beatles or Kinks tracks. And he's like, I could be waiting 5 years to hear one of my favorite songs if we're waiting on random. So he gave me 3 suggestions, and this was one of them. So I thought, that's a good idea. I like it. I'm figuring out a way to open that up to all the other subscribers so that we can do it in a way that they're not picking songs that are like a week away from being done anyway. But the 3 songs he gave me, I have the next 60 episodes planned, and none of the 3 songs that he gave were in the next 60. So he got lucky on that one. So thank you, Roland, for the great idea and for the great suggestion, because today we're talking about Holiday, which was released November 24th, 1971 on the album Muswell Hillbillies. It's the 3rd track on the album and is one of my favorite tracks on one of my favorite albums. So this was a good one to do. This is the first album for RCA that the Kinks did, and the first to feature the Mike Cotton sound as their horn section for almost all of the tracks. They are all over the place on this album. And I'll never understand why this album wasn't a huge hit. Because it falls, if you look at what other bands were doing at the time, it falls in line with what the Stones were doing on Sticky Fingers. I mean, Brown Sugar and Skin and Bone could be sister songs as far as I'm concerned. It falls in line with what Faces were doing on A Nod Is As Good As a Wink. And that had a big hit on it with Stay With Me. Or what the band was doing on pretty much all of their albums, particularly the one the year before. I'm forgetting the name. Todd Rundgren's all over it. But this kind of like almost country, not quite country. I mean, you can still tell it's a British rock band, but, you know, very heavily influenced by country and acoustic driven stuff, was kind of in fashion. And while this album was a huge departure for the Kinks, it also happens to be kind of hip with what the other big bands of the day were doing. You know, and the Kinks were among the biggest bands of the day. I mean, you got to remember, this is right after Lola, which is a huge hit, an album that sold a lot. They're touring all over the place again, including America for the first time in several years. So they're at the top of their game when this album comes out in 71, and it does nothing. You know, it charts just barely in the top 150 in the US and doesn't do anything in the UK, despite it being an exceptional album, and one could argue one of their best albums. But I'll save all this for when we do a full episode on that. Today we're talking specifically about Holiday, which is a pretty simple song. Maybe the simplest song on the album. And I put it in the same family as songs like Sunny Afternoon or Sitting by the Riverside or Sitting in the Midday Sun, which is a song that, you know, chronologically hasn't been released yet, but it's kind of on the same vein that is very lazy feeling and relaxed, and Ray's vocal delivery is almost inebriated sounding. And the lyrics are very relaxed, but sometimes biting. And this kind of fits in that vein. And I think it's a very cool trick that Ray does occasionally, maybe once an album, but it works every time he does it, because every song I mentioned in this style are among my favorites. The subject of the song, whether it's Ray or not, who knows, is singing about this little vacation. And on the surface, it sounds, you know, like a pleasant little outing. But then when you really listen to the lyrics, it's not a particularly pleasant vacation. The sun never shines. It's cloudy the whole time and gloomy. He complains that the sea's an open sewer and the sand gets in his sunburn blisters. I'm not sure how sunburned he got with all the cloud cover. But ultimately, it still beats the grind of the city because now he can sleep without sleeping pills, and his insecurities are behind him. And it's an unappealing holiday, but in comparison to the everyday workaday, it's an upgrade still. And if that's not a perfect Ray Davies lyric, I don't know what is. His ability to be full of hope while still filled with piss and vinegar is unparalleled in rock and roll music. The structure of the song is much more simple than the lyrics. He starts on an A chord, but it doesn't stay grounded in A for immediately because the next chord he hits is an F sharp major. And in the key of A, the F sharp should be a minor chord. So we've heard this before. A to F sharp minor, 1 to 6, is pretty common. Right? That's like that doo-wop stuff we've talked about. It's all over the place. But doing A to F sharp major, that's a very different thing. That's a major 6 chord. And I think this is just something that is inherently English because the Beatles did it a lot. The Kinks do it a lot. It's an instant hook. Instantly. So he goes to major instead of a minor. Then he goes to a B7. So we're doing A to F sharp to B7, which is a 5 of 5. All right. So in the key of A, the 5 chord is an E. The 5 chord off of E is B7. All right. And then after and usually a 5 of 5 is followed by a 5 chord, which is exactly what he does here. This is standard operating procedure. 5 of 5 to 5, and then back to 1. And that 5 of 5 to 1, it's a very strong pull back to the tonic. In this case, that F sharp major chord, major 6, not to be confused with a 6th chord, which is like adding that kind of sound. This is still just a 3-note chord. It functions as a secondary dominant, okay, which it's basically the 5 of 2, okay. So these are borrowed chords, and we've talked about borrowed chords a lot on this podcast. So in the key of A, the 2 chord is B, okay, and if we were building off of that B scale, the 5 chord would be F sharp major, okay. But here's the hinky part. That 2 should also be minor. So if he was going to a 5 of 2, he should go to B minor, which still sounds great, but he goes to B major. So even when he's doing something that, theoretically I can, diagram in 5 of 2 to 5, whatever, he's responding to this 5 of 2 by going, instead of to 2, he's going to the harmonic major of that. And then that harmonic major happens to be the 5 of 5. When you throw that 7th note above it, it happens to be the 5 of 5 back to A. So it's really a cool little progression. It's nothing, you've heard it before. It's not unique to the Kinks, but I do like the way he does it. And I know I said that this was a simple song and then made it sound much more complicated, but I promise it's just a nice sounding chord change that feels more like it's in A major than the chords actually allow musically. Then for the bridge, where he goes to the I'm leaving insecurity behind me, he jumps to a 4 chord, which is common for a bridge. A lot of times the bridges go to a 4 chord, in this case D, and then a diminished 7th chord. So the way he uses this chord is by raising the D. So we're on a D chord, okay, and then if we take the D and raise it a half step but leave every other note the same, that's a D sharp diminished. All right. So I've spoken about the versatility of this chord before because essentially there are only 3 diminished chords. Because of the way the notes are spaced out, if I start the D diminished chord, right? Or D sharp diminished rather. On D sharp, it's a D sharp diminished chord. But if I take that D sharp and throw it on the top, and now I'm starting on an F sharp, it's an F sharp diminished chord. And so anytime there's really only 3 diminished chords, note wise, because they all invert into other versions of the chord, and only diminished chords and augmented chords do this. A major chord um, inverts into itself. But these diminished chords and augmented chords, when you invert them, they can actually function as other chords. And the other cool thing about it is if we are using it as an ascension, so if we're going from D to D sharp, it sounds hopeful. But if we're using it as a descending thing, like we're going G to F sharp diminished, it has the opposite feel. So how you use that diminished chord also lends to its versatility. I love diminished chords. They're the best. So he goes back and forth, usually ending on the A. But then he does like the C sharp thing. And then holds onto that E chord for quite a while, which takes us back to the A. So it's pretty cool stuff. Like I said, it's not overly complicated, but the way he uses it is still cool. I'm gonna do a little bit of it. I'm gonna change the key for my voice, but I'm gonna do a little bit of it just so you can hear how these chord changes work. Holiday, oh what a lovely day today. I'm so glad they sent me away to have a little holiday today. Holiday, holiday. I'm just standing at the end of a pier, hoping and dreaming you were here to share my little holiday. Looking at the sky for a gap in the clouds. Sometimes I think that sun ain't never coming out. I'd rather be here than in that dirty old town. I had to leave the city 'cause it nearly brought me down. Oh, holiday. Oh, what a lovely day today. I think I'll get down on my little old knees and pray. Thank you, Lord. Thank heaven for that holiday today. Holiday. Here's the bridge. Leaving insecurity behind me. The environmental pressure got me down. I don't need no sedatives to pull me around. I don't need no sleeping pills to help me sleep sound. Oh, holiday. Oh, what a lovely day today. I think I'll get down on my little knees and pray. That's what I'll do. Thank heaven for that holiday. So that's basically it. You could also turn this into a Leon Redbone song pretty easy. It's very much in that style. And like I said, Ray's delivery of it, very lazy. To me, it sounds like he's got something in his mouth. And so and that could just be a vocal effect they have, running on the signal of the in the production on the tape. But to me, I always just picture him sitting with an acoustic guitar on a beach with a cigar hanging out of his mouth while he plays this. And overall, on Muswell Hillbillies in general, I've always heard this as an album where they're playing in that tavern that's pictured on the front cover and are getting a little bit more tipsy as they go. And this is the song where you really start to hear, that second beer kick in. And so that's what I've always liked about this. There's really nothing I don't like about this album. I think we've covered a number of songs on it already, and I don't think I've really had any bad things to say about any of them. It's just a solid album, and this is a great little song on that album. A live version of the song does appear on the second disc of Everybody's in Showbiz. Most of this album appears, if not all of it, appears on that live disc. And it also appears on a compilation album that was released, I believe, in 1975 called the Kinks' Greatest Celluloid Heroes album. And if you're not aware of this album, go look up the track listing. This is an incredible compilation. Not a bunch of hits, obviously, but it really picks the best of the best from Muswell Hillbillies up until that point. And it is a LP I'd very, very much like to have in my collection. I really like the track listing on that one. And Holiday, like I said, does appear on that. So that's about all I've got about for this particular song. If you would like me to bump one of your favorites up to the top of the list, all you got to do is swing by herohabit.com and contribute our $4 a month to help keep this podcast going. And I know there have been delays in production and stuff, but there's a lot going on right now, and sometimes it gets to be very difficult to record. But I promise you, I'm not done until all the songs are covered, even if there are a couple weeks here or there where there are gaps. So anyway, you can find all the information you need at herohabit.com. And of course, swing by our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/kinksandbeats, and start a conversation over there. All right. I will talk to you guys again tomorrow. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. And make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review over on iTunes. Thanks so much. Have a great day. This podcast is presented by the Hero Habit Podcast Network. Swing by herohabit.com today to comment on this episode and poke around our growing database of sports and pop culture news, reviews, and collectibles. herohabit.com. Collect your heroes.